Thank you, Alf. Thank you, Alf. And I would like to present to the college some shredded bankrupt mortgage documents from the Pacific Northwest that can be added to the straw mix for the adobe brick. So there's more where this comes from. Yeah. The purpose of the lecture tonight, poetic utility from ephemeral tinkering. And so there's more stories tonight than images. You've been watching a number of images that can be explained on the website, as Alf suggested. Often I go in and do a project, but what really interests me is engaging with the social situation. And I'd ask if this was a land-grant college. It's not, but perhaps you can partner with the university it is. What I liked about the land-grant colleges was there was this kind of sweat equity, work ethic. In the early days when, in this case, the University of Maine started, the students were making drainage tiles and the brick for the buildings. Cattle grazed on their lawns for dairy products and provided a wonderful mowing job. So if I guess the university here insists on having green grass, perhaps that might be a rationale for keeping that grass around. In this case, I convinced the dean of the School of Engineering that the seniors should, as a rite of passage and also as a credit for physical fitness, shovel the walks in Cloak Plaza that I was designing. And that every year that was the responsibility of the senior students in engineering school to shovel the way for the underclassmen, to make the way through the plaza. The janitors were happy because that kept the salt to a minimum and the sand. Issues that you don't probably concern yourself about, but maybe there's another application. It's one of those things, if you're not there and prodding, probably doesn't happen. But it's the idea that this shovel could be a work of art, much like Duchamp showed a snow shovel that now hangs at Yale University, or Joseph Beuys has got a shovel that was part of his tree planting conceptual art piece. Not always does the tinkering come first. This is a parable for a light rail project, more of a plop art piece, but it brought together rail that had been decommissioned, probably by the motor companies in the early 20s. Our light rail system in Seattle that was quite extensive, then was eradicated, now is being put back. And cast iron pears, wrecking balls, parable is the name of the piece. But the piece became more complete later on. And they never called me to tell me, Mr. Simpson, will you come down and tell us whether this is to remain or to go? I liked it. So, there's a number of projects over my career that keep feeding the next project. We do best what we like or seem to have an interest in. Kohler residency at the Kohler factory. They have an artist in residency program. Did a number of vitreous china plates, the same product that you sit on quite often. And low-fired, placed in various outfalls. There they steep for a couple years, pulled out, in this case, the East River in New York, You can tell because you can see the World Trade Center buildings in the background, and then fired. And the embellishment is the effluent. So we do really, truly wish for an uneventful plate. Composting commode on First Avenue in 1978 kind of pushed the envelope. I think our job as an artist, one of them, one of many, we invent our own job description, by the way, is to be the provocateur, the trickster, the coyote, your mascot, to put stuff out there that needs paying attention to. In this case, we had a lot of indiscriminate street-level defecation by the homeless that needed some level of human decency offered to them. This was also a time when Seattle was embarking on continuing the flush commode and building another major infrastructural piece. More on that later. A more cost-effective approach might have been this composting commode that sat on future tree pits and then would move to the next tree pit, and a tree was planted. So the contributions were the nurturement for that tree. 1978. Now we move ahead to 2012. The Gates Foundation, you might have saw in the news where they are now offering composting commodes to third world countries. I think they also should consider us. A most recent commission is for a $1.8 billion wastewater facility for the greater metropolitan Seattle area. In Seattle, in the state, in the county, we have a percent for art program, like you do here. This generated a fairly decent budget. It's tied into infrastructure, the percent for art program. And a number of artists did pieces that dealt with the science of this project, and were brought in early on to work with the engineers, the scientists. I created a piece that was at the entry to the facility that functioned to mitigate the chlorine still in the water, off-gassed it before it was offered to perk in the watershed or sent out to Puget Sound. It was, although it goes through an osmosis process, there's still traces of endocrine disruptors in all of our effluent, no matter how sophisticated a system we have, which is a big issue. This happens to be the diffuser that is going to be sunk out in Puget Sound that diffuses the discharge. So there's a little bit of connection there. This is the entryway into it. There's a water molecule in the background there, sucking on a purple pipe bubble tea straw. We have a lot of kids that come here because there's a big educational component. And they drive by and they get it. The engineers finally get the fact that this is a water molecule because they're so foiled by the other coding going on here. But to the kids, they're going to be drinking this bubble tea water someday. So we're working on them. You remember Joe the plumber? This is Purple Pipe Boot Camp for Joe the plumber. I might have to explain purple pipes. Purple pipes are those pipes you see out in the landscape, in any politically correct landscape out there that's colored purple. You'll see them in the cover plates. That's reclaimed water, and that's the color coding. So I've adopted that color for any project that deals with that kind of water. So this is the Purple Pipe Training Camp, boot camp for plumbers. You got it. And this is what I would hope and would envision getting serious about how we manage our gray water in the city. not only is it our effluent, but it's also our airborne effluent from coal mines and other forms of combustion. This is a very early piece. I have been doing a series of purge projects since 83. This is 1991. Headwaters of the Hudson River, large limestone discs that are placed in the river. It works both sculpturally, but also what's more important to me, pharmaceutically, to neutralize the acidic pH level of the river water. Our oceans now are becoming more acidic. So this is, even though we don't hear about acid rain so much anymore, it's still coming back. So again, it's the artist helping the public equate, taking a Rolade or a bufferin of some sort and equating their system to the greater system out there. Then it's not the answer, obviously. Just got to eat right. They are dissolved down to almost nothing. They almost look like a cowlick that's about ready to go. They're scalloped beautifully. I didn't include that slide. I'm sorry. Come back later and I'll email it to you. But they're beautiful. But they're just about dissolved by now because I was there 10 years later. Well, then there's the other part of the equation too. This limestone. It's often, in Rome, I visited the Vatican, where they have this pile of like limestone cannonballs. And yes, rocks can be projectiles as well as something that pharmaceutically heals. And it's not that we want to go that way, but it is the way that if we don't pay attention to these big complex issues and work toward them, instead of putting our head in the sand, they come back to bite us. That's limestone in the sling otherwise there for you all. Yep. And then of course there's the frog is one of our our canaries for acid rain, and so these are voxels that depict a pixelated a frog in a acidic breeding pond. And this is just upriver from the location. This is a molybdenum plant, can't pronounce it, that ceased operation about 20 years ago, and it's a brownfield, obviously. Look at that. Nothing is growing on it except those strange little yellow plants there that I bet you Monsanto probably owns the DNA of those now. The umbrella, just paint the umbrella with pH indicator dye and stick it out, and you'll see what your acid rain level is. And that's Seattle. And it's going to get worse as we become more downwinders to coal from across the ocean. Other social efforts. There's an ordinance against hanging your clothes out to dry in many condominiums around the country because it's so disgusting. To me, they're banners of human occupation. Here we have them stretched across an alley just north of Pike Place Market, 1978, between a fixed income housing unit and a luxury condominium for them to share the same amenity, a clothesline. And perhaps the sugar jar will go across to the other side if somebody's short of sugar over on that other side one night. Works as an aeolian harp when the line is bare, banners of human occupation, or just as used. Long story there. Then there's the urban water management, working with groups to try to redirect the urban watershed. I mean, we steal water from the watershed, the natural watershed, bring it into the city, do our business, and then send it on its way. A lot of cities have, and in this neighborhood particularly, have combined sanitary and storm water dumping into the same pipe, going out to a very expensive process, Brightwater, for instance, which is, it takes many pumps to pump it about 20 miles north of Seattle uphill, digest it, pump it another like 15, 20 miles over to Puget Sound. It's not a cheap system. Anyway, this is a boat truss downspout, taking water down from one level of a rough watershed to another watershed landscape, and then down to this waiting cistern, beckoning cistern, which is this hand reaching out with the downspout from that rough watershed, entering the index finger with the stigmata water level gauge in the middle, and water pouring out the thumb, overflow, and then on down to the next location, taken from the Sistine Chapel. You've got God and man there, or Mother Nature in this case, and whoever. The next trip on its journey is to the beckoning, or to the cistern steps, where there's a large community garden right adjacent to it. This is during construction of the cistern steps, where you see the cells of the retention of the water as it makes its way down. This is where you're working with the community, with the developers, to take their watershed, which they would have had to make a large tank to hold their water. It's required by law. Typically, they would put it down in the basement. It's expensive. A couple Porsches could have parked there. Instead, we make a deal with them. The water comes across the street and into our cistern steps, and is used both by the community garden as well as having a bit more dignity than being sent out, 20 miles. I like to say it saves the taxpayers money. This is another cistern in another part of that same neighborhood, and the expression of a head of water that from a 15-story high condominium. Then there's the downspouts that just capture rainwater coming down the side of the building and creating a vertical landscape approach. These are projects that I prototyped a long time ago. Then later on you get the more Gucci version. This is the Home Depot version. No copyrights, folks, no copyrights. Unlike I'm waiting for Disney to come and nail me on the Mickey Mouse bubble tea straw. An artist was nailed on that, on getting close to the Mickey Mouse logo once. And then they keep evolving and getting more romantic, stainless steel milking buckets. That's all designed, to each one of those elbows creates a water table, so that in all of these designs, so that there's, during dry period, there is some water in the system. And there is a pecking order, as there is in life. The 1% up there at the very top, and they make their way down, and then we probably have something that grows down in this part of the country, down here at the bottom. Not that that has anything to do with the 1%. This is a piece out in front of Whole Foods down in Pasadena, where the chiller water, and they had been spewing out about 5,500 gallons of water a month, and it's being redirected to this aeration device, and the intent is that now that we've separated it and it's not directly going into the combined sanitary storm sewer, it is available for irrigation. Fortunately, this is on the high side of a city block, and as the rest of the block gets developed further down, this water can become available for flushing toilets, irrigation, even water features. And then another, our true, and then this applies particularly to cities like Albuquerque. I think your true urban watershed that has not been captured yet is your gray water, such as your morning shower. There's a lot of water that leaves your house every day that's fairly benign. And so some kind of system, even within your own house, of a hydroponic cleansing system where it slowly works its way down and becomes this treatment, but it is being treated. You could have quite a bit of water by just capturing that potential. This is actually a milestone for the state of California, the first gray water drinking fountain. Not that the water is gray water, but that the water was being directed to a tree, which, seems like a lot of common sense. And I've done a few of these drinking fountains where people take the drink and they see the water, and it's starting to happen now. People are doing it more and more, but in some states there's ordinances against that. In this case, the water perks down over a tufa stone, which cools the next person's drink. And then it waters this willow tree that's part of an indigenous tree. Santa Ana, your river nurtures and your hot winds cool. The water kissing your lips is an offering. And of course, any designer knows that it's a blessing to have all these requirements, such as ADA and stuff, because that helps you with your design. Every time they throw another rule at you, it just makes the design far more interesting and complex. So, as they say, bring it on. Again, that drinking fountain starts to tell people in a very kind of discreet way, if they're paying attention, either through the poetry or noticing the function, like a lot of my work, that a legibility of how this could work for you. I was working over in Doha and for a streetscape project, and was interested in redirecting the ablution water from the mosques and not have them, which is typical now, of sending it down into a sewer, but directing it to a garden based on the Quran. That would be part of it and visually connected. And that way, my hope would be that after seeing that enough times, they might get an idea that they could take the same practice home to their house and do that with, say, their gray water. I mean, it's a little odd for a fellow like me to be over there pitching an idea like that, but I did travel to Sana'a, where in Yemen, where they've been practicing this for over 500 years, and I've visited some of those sites and documented that, just to back up this idea that idea had religious merit as well as practical merit. And there's a number of gardens in particularly the historic, the World Heritage Old Town of Sana'a that grows quite a bit of food for the community. My community in First Avenue since the mid-'70s was a laboratory. I probably cut my teeth as a researcher by just putting stuff out there, watching it, taking the stuff that didn't work away and improving the stuff that did seem to work. The composting commode was a good example. It was out for about 3 weeks in one location and a little longer in another location before the city health department nailed me, because it was not obviously it would be, it's not sanctioned, and it's that old adage, ask forgiveness rather than permission. But they did agree that there was an issue. And as a result of that, the University of Washington Urban Planning Department came down, and we conducted a week-long workshop on how to solve these problems. So in this case, we were planting a tree, just in what we call on First Avenue an urban arboretum. The city engineering department had a very limited idea of the palette of kind of trees that they would permit on First Avenue, generally for some odd reason. There are some good reasons, like you don't plant the broadleaf maple because their roots are very invasive. But in the case here, we've got a Gary oak, which does grow that far north in some locations. We made it a community exercise along with a number of other plantings. It took the city a little while to catch on to that we were doing this. They came along and extracted this tree. They said it was dead and dumped it down in their dump, and Jack Mackey and I went down there and retrieved it and put it back out on the street. And you notice that there's leaves on it. Other trees, because we had very low budget, $100 a bus stop. The trees were so young that the limbs would get broken. This is a neighborhood that has happy hour at 6 in the morning. And by 8 o'clock, you're looking for a stabilizer. And so you use a crutch to mend the broken limb, right? Isn't that what they're for? Although some people got it and said, I need a crutch, and they started taking the crutch off from. So that was an idea that had some flaws to it. My studio, you see the claw over there on your right. Going all along First Avenue, there are these single resident occupancy hotels. Typically very modest, a simple bed frame, which as the building started to be looked at for demolishing, we gleaned as the artist in this neighborhood what we could from it. And because our trees were young and fragile, we would take these bed frames and bend them to create these tree guards just to protect the tree. Just as a kind of an ad hoc, vernacular, low budget way to buy time for the tree. And sometimes, they're cheaply made bed frames, so they would fall apart. So there's the whole story. We start embellishing these stories as artists. Some of the slides you've seen, and eventually we take that discarded relic and we make a cast iron pattern out of it, and now these are all solid cast iron bed frames up and coming in where needed along the street. So over the course of about 20 years, there's been this transformation from kind of a back pocket idea to something that is now kind of a established something that's got some history there as a design solution to the street. Walla Walla Penitentiary. It was commissioned by the Walla Walla Penitentiary to do a work of art. Politically, they did not want artists doing anything in the penitentiary. They wanted to direct the energy downtown in the town of Walla Walla. The river, the Mill Creek ran right by the penitentiary. They also, and this is Mill Creek when it runs through downtown, basically an imprisoned stream itself. This is supposed to be a trout stream, a salmon stream. And for the stretch that goes through downtown, which was redesigned, I guess you would call it, by the Army Corps of Engineers in the 30s to deal primarily with flooding and to get the water to flow through town as quickly as possible. Literally, some of these locations in downtown Walla Walla, this stream runs underneath buildings. So it seemed like an interesting connection between the penitentiary and this Mill Creek, this stream. Both had this notion that it was bound, but how could we also take the meaning of bound being contained into an expansion idea to look at the positive side of it. So because they had a license plate stamping operation at the penitentiary, we started working with writers in the watershed on poetic license, of course. Ideas about containment, about the stream, that would find a use out along the river. The warden, who is really a champion of this license plate operation because it was a great way to show the inmates work ethic and to give them some responsibility and to kind of up the ante by stamping poetry was kind of cool. He took me down into the basement of the penitentiary where they've cut plates and patched over the form boards with big knot holes with the remnants of plates. And then when they cast the concrete, you had this impression as after they've pulled a form board away. And to me, that was a perfect example of what needed to happen along Mill Creek. It'll be years and years before they get around to correcting that contained stream by creating more habitat along the stream, which will require concrete, but in a much more habitat-friendly way. And when that casting is done, this poetry can be placed in those form boards that they now see along the stream in another kind of context. These are some of the poems from the writers of the watershed. This is a scientist analysis of what's wrong with that stream. And both of these, this is nighttime shot, both of these poems, they've been duplicated, and as you can see over there on your left, there's poetry now slowly starting to find its way along Mill Creek. When I first started this project, we had some uneasy board of or county supervisors that basically didn't like the idea, even though the idea was approved by the Arts Commission. And so, you know, sometimes, again, we just wait a while. And in this case, Whitman College accepted it as part of their permanent collection and put it along their easement of the river, which you can see is close to flooding right now, and you know, an issue of the watershed. The Army Corps of Engineers has an office or a big building right along that Mill Creek as well. And this is a new Army Corps of Engineer building in Seattle that's just been finished, and the Corps is going to be moving in another month. I was asked to come in and develop a project a little late in the game, which unfortunately happens a little bit too much. I like to, you know, work with the site and the infrastructure and leverage money that would have been spent on something that I could probably help them out with, and we would both profit from it in theory. What I was intrigued with, though, was that along the river's edge, you see some root wads, some biomass that's put along the Duwamish River. This was a river that for years the likes of the Army Corps of Engineers had been dredging and pulling all of the root wads at that time and snags, they called them, out of the river and got rid of them, although it's good for salmon habitat to have that protection along the river's edge. This is what happened at the turn of the century to the Duwamish River. You see the meander, and now you see that the shipping canal that cuts right through, and then a lot of those oxbows have been decommissioned and filled in. And my sculpture actually sits on one of those oxbows. But here we have the Army Corps of Engineers. They are starting to make a paradigm shift in their thinking. They're starting to learn that, you know, being sensible, working with nature, being a steward is good. And that's been feeding into what I was thinking about for this project. So we have these young folks planting trees. You see the root wads in the background with anchors. Often, in my aesthetic criticism is often we kind of try to naturalize all these kind of human interventions instead of just being honest and blatant about what we're doing as kind of an educational tool, if nothing else. So here's a very large root wad that's being placed in the river. Now, I envisioned in my second proposal, I'll spare you the first proposal, it's too complicated, but I think it's on my website, I might have pulled it. These large tetrapods, which the Corps uses for shoreline armament, armor. To me, they were anchors, kind of sumo wrestlers. So there was this ballet that I envisioned between buoyancy and mass. These anchors would be very blatant and obvious what they do. They are the anchor to hold these root wads down. But they're up on the shore right now because, ironically, the Corps wasn't able to get their permit in time for when the landscaping happened in front of their building. So there's nothing, they could not do the root wads in the river. So I had this idea that, okay, we will put the root wads with their anchors, with this army, this battalion of sumo wrestlers at the ready, holding, ready to be deployed out into the river in formation, kind of for the colonel to observe from up above down on the and then they get moved into the river, much like your football coach kind of draws the arrows for the next move. And there they are, obvious what their function is and how they're being held there to rot and produce feed and protection. So that one went by the wayside for a few oddball reasons. You know, I think I have in here my host analog project in Oregon at the front of the Oregon Convention Center, which is 8 segmented, 8-foot diameter, old growth logs that had been bucked and left to lie in the Bull Run watershed. And I brought them into town and put a misting system to equate the rainforest or the ecosystem that I gleaned them from. And there they've sat since '91. And this volunteer landscape of both city and indigenous that came in with them are doing kind of this dance with each other. I might have that. Hope I did put it in here. Anyway, you know, the GSA Art and Architecture Department had a problem with rotting wood as an art medium, even though artists have been working with rotting wood for a while now. So on to the next idea. The Elwha Dam on the Elwha River that flows out the north slope of the Olympic Peninsula has been demolished. As you can see this cut. And it has been reopened for salmon to come back up. This is major. This is the first time a dam of this size has been decommissioned and has been removed. And what it's done is created a whole new set of phenomena along the river. Old stumps that had been logged over 100 years ago in the what became the reservoir of the dam got totally covered over. That pile of material on top of that stump is sediment that was laid down when this was underwater in the reservoir. So there's a lot of very interesting stuff around like that. There's some cannonballs from the Vatican. So now we're getting into, so there's the rubble from that dam that I got some of that rubble from that dam. It seems spiritual to me and a positive thing that the Corps has been involved with. They've been sending a lot of biologists and hydrologists over to observe what's going on. They've actually found salmon already making their way up, despite the heavily laden silt in the stream coming down out through this dam sediment that's built up over 100 years. So, there's the cannonballs, there's the proverbial pyramid of cannonballs, there's the Corps' use of the tetrapod, the pyramid, in the building of the McNary Dam on the Columbia. Number of different references. And then there's this beautiful ovaloid of the eagle that the Corps was probably one of their first major environmental endangered species efforts. We basically stacked 20 ovaloids on top of each other, pinned the first tier of 10, and everything above that is just set and nesting inside of each other and stamped by a structural engineer. And yes, from the front, it looks, the front of this new facility, it looks like a stack of cannonballs, but as you work your way around to the side, you see this ovaloid tetrahedron container that it is, resting with the backdrop of what's still a very vital, active industrial river situation. Another dam, this is the Shasta Dam in Northern California. A number of years ago, I was brought in to look at the monolith. The community always just called this the monolith, so I just adopted their name. But you see it now 30 feet high. It was twice that height as the source of all the aggregate that was basically scooped out of the Sacramento River. This is, in the 30s, back before the EPA, scooped out of the river, fish and all, put into a hopper, brought over to this structure, either crushed with the ball mills, cleaned on some of the upper levels. That's why this is such a stout, 2-foot thick building, wall building, and then put on, sorted, piled, put on a conveyor belt that went 11 miles up to Shasta Dam. And they wanted me to honor it, and there's like a whole long thing in my website about it, but I think some of the key ironic things was, here we see the dredge with its 12-yard bucket hauling gravel out of the Sacramento River in Redding, and here we see upstream a front-end loader dumping gravel just below Shasta Dam for the salmon habitat to spawn in, because when we closed off the Sacramento River with the Shasta Dam, it could no longer create the gravel or send the gravel downstream for the spawning beds. So now we're like hauling gravel back up to the river, which we once just took it out from. And then that red line you might have noticed around the monolith, and here you see it here, is a silt marking of the last, in 1940, the last high water that came through and flooded out the monolith just before they corked the dam. And so that's kind of a marking. We have George Koutras here, who was 8 years old at the time and witnessed that flood. And I asked George how high the flood was, and he put his hand up, but we had to reduce him down to a child of 8 to get the right scientific measurement. And the coup de grace is the taking of that shape, that beautiful shape. Actually, Shasta Dam is a beautifully constructed structure, and taking that shape and creating a photovoltaic panel out of it that collects, and it's actually the arched, it's the side it confronts the water, and so you have this kind of beautiful, elegant piece up on top of this machine of a building. It's kind of the Beauty and the Beast thing, and we all know, watching Beauty and the Beast, that we fell in love with the Beast before the Beast was transformed, because he had character as a beast. Does that make sense? Good. I didn't want to think that it was just me. Portland, Oregon, just to prove to you not to go up there, or to Seattle, because this is what you get, a lot of rain. This is a bicycle rack with green roof on top, made out of oil barrels. And the water deposits its water down onto an oil drum. And then it goes into a water infiltration system that's located both fore and aft of the structure, the bike rack. And it's a very popular hangout.
Does that barrel resonate with sound?
That's it. Yeah, drum. So it's got, we dented it like a marimba. You're asking some good questions. Well, you should take our class, I think. You could get an immediate A. Yes, it does. And this pipe you see coming across here comes from the building and delivers the water across. This is kind of radical stuff, I mean, it's one thing to be in your studio doing radical art, and that's beautiful, and that's pure research. But when you can pull off something like this, I think a lot of you that are out there at the permit counter a little bit too much, and realize that this, you're going to have a problem with this. This will float your boat. This will make your day. Something as simple as just running a pipe. Instead of that downspout going down here, you just take it over there, because there's a guy up there that's watering in the summertime when it does get dry, and waters and his overflow waters our little landscape up there. The underneath side of the barrels, we have the names of some of the famous oil fields that have been sucked dry. Okay, we'll go into a little bit more of the poetry here. This is a very early poem to be worn on First Avenue, carved in sandstone, slowly wearing away. You're welcome to wear it. David Oates, a writer in Portland. We thought we'd give the community a little gift of some poetry on the silt fence. I mean, the silt fences could become a great way to talk about what's going on. What we love will save us. Well, some of the people in the neighborhood complained, so we realized that we were going to have to work on this one a little bit. So now we're in the process of making it legit. This is stamped in concrete. It's going along 7 miles of the Portland Tri-Met light rail system, the Orange Line. So being the Orange Line, the first phase of the poetry exercise is that the poetry will be on orange silt fence. We solicited to the greater community, got over 1,000 poems, whittled it down to about 100 with a selection panel that included David Oates and some other writers of the area, blind voting, and they have been placed along this 7-mile alignment. Whenever the construction crew needed another roll of silt fence, you know, they would go over to this pile and grab it and put it up. So they became somewhat the curator of where the placement of the silt fencing would go. And then, of course, there's documents after documents after documents, because this is like one of those projects where all your T's and dots and I's and crosses and X's have to go. We have pages of the documents that articulate where the silt fence goes and then eventually where the concrete poetry will go. Here's the contractors doing. We've got to come up with a spell check system here, because there's a little bit of a problem. But and also, you know, when they were first working this out, their technique has improved vastly. This is, although it's kind of not spelled right, it's supposed to be D-H-E-R-E. The craftsmanship of the application is improving. And of course, it harkens back to the whole neighborhood up around Portland where this has been going on for years, but it's almost become a lost art. So we've brought it back again. The contractors and concrete workers love this work. You know, it gives them a sense of pride and engagement. And which we're talking about here now, here in Albuquerque, where we went out and just gathered some old pallets, brought them into the site. Here we are working out and all of these people, Alf and I noted, they all get like a good mark today because they're out there working. So this idea that bringing like a pallet in that, you know, pedestal, portable pedestal, platform, plinths, pulpit, pallet, artist palette, of course, is this common ground that is sited out on the campus. It doesn't mess with the campus. It's its own pedestal. If you need mass to deal with wind shear, you just load it up with weight. However, this is and then you start to deal with the sociology of the site that you've picked and are working on how this work of art will exist. My idea with this galvanized pallet is that it's almost a free enterprise zone to float around out on campus somewhere that people could do whatever they wanted on. It was a free speech zone, like what happened in Berkeley with the Free Speech Park. Portable landscape, Samsonite suitcases on a pallet. Galvanized pallets. A project in Philadelphia, a declaration of the necessity for the public good. I like the Windsor chair because both ends of the spectrum were able to afford this chair. It was individual from one colony city to the next. It was in a lot of variations. And it was the chair that's associated with the signing of the Constitution. My problem with a lot of what's going on in Philadelphia is there's no way for just strangers to engage with each other. It's all stand behind the velvet ropes and look, instead of maybe sitting down in these bronze chairs that would be situated in a way that there could be discourse. Pallet wood. Pallets also like a very common denominator. The combining of the pallet or an attempt anyway, of the Windsor chair. The planks of the Constitution taken from the Declaration of Independence, and on parchment paper applied to the boards of the pallets, the planks in a way, and then just some variations on the themes of different seating situations that went on. Here we got the blue state and the red states doing battle with each other, little details up there. This happened this was going on during the election at the time. We had George Washington, who you would see around Philadelphia often if you were visiting there, come in and honor us at the opening. There we've got the 55-gallon barrel drum over there on the side. And here he is entertaining some trade dignitaries and negotiating a new source for tea, perhaps. And that's the positive way to deal with the tea issue. And then eventually the idea is that these expressions get put out on the street. This happens to be the last of a 170-year-old wood turning operation that was just up the street, and I had him carve the profiles of the two presidents that you might recognize their profile. And here's the bronze maquette. It was a project that didn't quite see the light of day. So I would like to strongly encourage you to go out and, for the sake of liberty and justice, vote. Thank you very much.